What seems crazy in normal times becomes necessary in a crisis. And right now, the Federal Reserve is saying this is necessary. Monetary systems come to ends every 95 years. Well, I think it's a pretty strong bet that you're gonna see the dollar drop dramatically over time, but it could drop like that.
The first advice I would give to anybody that wants to get into business is don't start a business, actually buy one that someone else has built. Last year, over 6 million Americans started a company from scratch, and 96% of those will fail within a 10-year period, and 50% of them will fail inside of 1 year. Rather than start a business, go and buy one that somebody else has built and no longer wants to own. There's over 2.4 million of them for sale today.
I just started seeing what were other YouTube channels doing as far as their thumbnail or their title or the information that they were sharing. And the big one that stood out to me was give people what they want. These topics are super important to me. I'll bet you that they're important to other people as well. Topics like stimulus check, what's happening with Wall Street and the stock market. And it was like attaching myself to a rocket ship. I still do my day-to-day, I still do financial coaching, but right now I could quit everything I'm doing and do YouTube and provide for my family.
Welcome to episode 4 of Money Revealed 2020. We are moving toward that halfway mark. This is a 9-part docuseries, so man, it's going fast. At least it seems like it for me. We just started episode 1 not long ago. Here we are in episode 4. So much more great content to bring you. So many new ideas for you to think about. I just get excited about this stuff. I love the fact that we're on this journey together. And it's not a quick journey. It's not a 5-minute blip. This is an entire arc of our full 9-part docuseries. There's so much amazing information and phenomenal presenters. I believe we put together the best assembly of experts in the world to cover the varying topics that we needed to. And boy, they sat down with us and they gave their heart and soul. They gave us everything they had. And why? Because they want you to benefit from it. So I'm glad that you're here with me right now. I hope that you're sharing this and letting other people know about Money Revealed 2020. I also do want to remind you that right now you can own it. And as a matter of fact, during the free viewing period, and we're almost halfway through that now, but during the free viewing period, we have extraordinary discounts on owning Money Revealed 2020, as well as some significant bonuses that really make this a no-brainer. So make sure you check that out. Right now, we need to get into episode 4, get down to business. Let's go. I really hope you got to see part 1 of Jeff Hayes' interview with Adam Baratta. This is vital information. And speaking for myself, after listening to Adam, that's when I invested in some gold. And there's a reason for it. If you saw what I saw, you'd probably be thinking the same thing right now too. So here comes part 2. Make sure you tune into this. Pay attention. Don't get distracted. There's a lot to learn here. So enjoy this interview. Part 2, Jeff Hayes and Adam Baratta.
So let's talk about the future. Let's talk about what you've done really good with predicting so far. Let's see what you're seeing.
Well, number one, we are entering into what will likely be one of the most uncertain times in American history. The election, coupled with what's happened, to the social construct over, what's evolved to the social construct over the last decade. I write about some of these things in the book because the second book is really so much more than just about investments. It's about what happens, how have we gone from here to here? A really good movie out called The Social Dilemma. Have you seen it?
Yes.
And what I've been following is this fake news, these fake feedback loops that we get. Are we in a recession right now? I don't know, the stock market's at all-time highs. And then if you look at the stock market, you go, hey man, things must be okay. But if you are one of the 30 million people collecting unemployment, you're not feeling that. If you are a big corporation, if you're one of the top 5 companies, you're killing it. But if you're a barber shop or a laundromat or a restaurant or a nail salon, you're not doing well. And the real economy has detangled from, the index. And the index is so poorly weighted, and where I see the future is I think the passive index investing model is over. I think it's going to return, negative returns over the next decade. I think that's why Warren Buffett is now moving into gold, because he sees the future. And the future I think he's seeing is the one that has me so excited to buy as much physical gold as I can right now, and why I'm going to keep buying. I have a goal in my head, like I said, of the number of ounces I want to get to, because I think gold's going to be $10,000 an ounce. I think it's going to get to 10,000 ounce. I originally had said by my daughter's 10th birthday, which will be in 2029, but I think it could happen by her 5th birthday, quite frankly.
Wow.
So I'm trying to buy aggressively, just like buy the dip was the mantra for stocks over the last decade. I think buy the dip on gold is going to be the mantra over the next 7 to 10 years. And I'll tell you precisely why I believe that, if you'll allow me.
Please.
Okay. So what did the Federal Reserve do on the September 16th meeting? My birthday, the big trade date that I had identified, a couple of very big things actually happened.
I'm assuming they celebrated your birthday.
It was a celebration for me, yes. And it's a celebration for people who, understand the story, because they've just solidified it. They did a couple things. Number one, they codified their new inflation target. See, the Federal Reserve has targeted 2% inflation for the longest time. And they're now saying, well, we're going to target inflation to run above 2% to make up for all the time that it fell under. So that was number one. They've codified that they're going to let inflation run hot, so to speak. They also announced that they're going to keep interest rates at 0% for 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024. We don't get to a rate hike for 4.5 years on their promise expectations. Now, they have been able to get interest rates to 2%. What makes anyone think they can get them to 2.5 or higher? And that's the big, Wall Street's not trusting this inflation target. Jeff, they're absolutely going to get inflation. They're going to get inflation in such a big way, and I'll tell you why. See, what they're really sending is Congress a message. And the message is, guys, borrowing is free right now, okay? So borrow as much as you can. In fact, we don't even see interest rates getting to 2%, so we don't see any inflation in the future. So you can borrow at will, and believe me, the next Congress that gets elected, whether it's red, blue, or purple, we're going to see massive fiscal stimulus. We know what Pelosi and team want to do, okay? Trump saying go for the gusto. So either way, we're going to see in the new administration a massive fiscal spending, massive. And we're going to see fiscal stimulus after fiscal stimulus after fiscal stimulus.
In what form?
Well, it's a great question. Tell me who wins the election. Tell me if it's red or blue, and I'll tell you how the form happens. See, think about it this way. Student debt, okay, is a crisis. $1.6 trillion in student debt. These are the millennials who are driving our economy, okay? They're the ones that are supposed to be buying houses and cars and spending money and going out and doing things, taking risks, and they're spending a good portion of their money paying down their debt. So it is not stimulative for the economy to have students not being able to pay their having to pay their debts. The blue team, they want to wipe out student debt. That's their solution. Okay, let's just wipe it out. Of course, that's the opposite of what the red team wants, okay? That sounds terrible. Wiping away debt is not a conservative thing to do, so you're not going to see them do it that way. But student debt's getting wiped out because we need to stimulate the economy. So whether it gets wiped out by a democratic wave that, removes it, or how does this sound? I'll tell you what, you can pay your debt, but we'll put the money in the stock market for you. Okay? So you're incentivized to pay your debts. So you have some stake in the future because it's too big a part of the population. Okay? This is the biggest part of the population we have, to not allow them to have a stimulative action. So it's how the rules get implemented, how the money flows, whether it's in incentives and tax credits or whether it's in debt forgiveness and entitlements. But either way, I believe the next administration will wipe out student debt. Students will, have a different way to deal with their debt situation. That's what I believe. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm surprised it hadn't happened already.
We're talking here right prior to the election, okay? So we don't know what's going to happen. But I certainly believe that the Republicans have made some, missteps. We saw what happened to the stock market when they passed the CARES Act, okay? Sure seems to me that the stock market has predicted the winner of the election like 97% of the time or something. So the number on the S&P 500 is 3,300. If the S&P 500 is above 3,300, the odds of the incumbent, Donald Trump, being reelected are significantly higher if it's below, because it's all about the last 90 days. So what it does from August 3rd to November 3rd, okay? So I think that number is about 3,300. And to me, if you pass the CARES Act too, all of that stimulative, all that money would flow, and you would see exactly what you saw when they passed the first one. Stocks would explode. They didn't do that. Trump, he's really smart. He's an empath for what is going on with the people. Okay, mm-hmm. I think it's his talent. So he's able to pinpoint, the emotional triggers, and he understands that this stimulative package is what we need. He said, go for the gusto. I think we should go for the bigger number. And it's, an interesting thing to think through for the future. If he gets reelected, how does this all play out with, Congress? What I'm looking at, Jeff, is the following. So, we have the blue team, which is progressive. You've got the red team, the Republicans, which are conservative. Okay, and there's no ground in the middle. You have a situation right now where we're in the middle of a pandemic. We're in the middle of a inequality crisis. We're in the middle of a global warming situation, and the Federal Reserve is the one thing that everybody agrees are heroes. They're the one entity that can't make a mistake. The Democrats love them, the Republicans love them, and here's what they've done. While we're all busy fighting each other, okay, polarized. You get information on your news feed that tells you this. I get information on my news feed that tells me that. And they're two different pieces of information, and we get feedback loops that only solidify what we already believe. Yep. It's no wonder we don't know what the hell's going on. So we're in the information age, have never had less information than we do right now, valuable, real information, except one thing. The Federal Reserve are heroes, okay? There's a saying for football. Okay, I'm a big football fan. Fans watch the ball. Okay, coaches watch the line of scrimmage. And while we've been on watching the ball, the protests and the pandemic and the political back and forth, the Federal Reserve's moved the line of scrimmage 90 yards, and no one's saying anything. They've literally taken the balance sheet. And now this is where I think it's a bonanza for gold in the coming decade, okay? Where the information we do really started to take off was the decade report I released in January, where I compared the U.S. debt to a deadly virus growing in a glass, okay? And the question was, if you had one bacteria in a glass that doubles every minute. And you began at 11 o'clock, and by what time would the class become completely full? And most people guess 11:30. Okay, they think, okay, well, if it doubles every minute, it'll be halfway there by 11:30. The answer is no. The glass doesn't become half full until 1 minute to midnight. At 1 minute to midnight, it's half full. At 2 minutes to midnight, it's a quarter full. At 3 minutes to midnight, it's an eighth full. And at 4 or 5 minutes to midnight, you can barely see it. And this is why mankind continues to make these same mistakes over and over again. We don't experience exponential growth as it's occurring. I'll give you an example. The 75-year-old who has a massive coronary on his 75th birthday doesn't get it from eating birthday cake.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
I mean, that's something that happens from decades probably of bad habits. And when the coronary is called an asymptote. And when you look at the doubling process, when it hits the asymptote, and an asymptote is technically a curve on an x and y axis that starts to shoot towards infinity. Once you hit the asymptote, it's game over. Okay, there's no stopping it. And so Bush doubled the debt of Clinton, Obama doubled the debt of Bush, Trump's on pace to double the debt of Obama, and we're doubling it. We've hit an asymptote. And that was the big story, of the decade report. Well, let's take a look at the Fed's balance sheet. In 1980, there was $150 billion on the balance sheet. Okay? 28 years later, in 2008, it had grown to about $750 billion, about 5x. So over 28 years, it grew 5 times. From 2008 to 2019, it went from $800 billion to $4 trillion, another 5x. So 5x in 28 years, now 5x in 11 years. Now extrapolate that out because they just doubled the balance sheet over the last year. When I said the balance sheet was going to hit $20 trillion by the year 2025, I was actually wrong by a year. It's going to hit it by 2024 if we hit this, if we continue on this pace. We've hit an asymptote. The only move that the Fed has is to keep expanding the balance sheet, printing more money. That's the only move they have. Interest rates are already at 0. They're indicating interest rates are going to be at 0. So we're going to see that. And the baton is now being passed off to fiscal stimulus. And the bell that went off, Jeff, as all this went down, I'd submitted the book. I knew the progression this had to take because Neil Howe is someone who's a guy I admire very much. He wrote a book called The Fourth Turning. And what he talks about is the supercycle. And the Great Devaluation is really evaluating that supercycle. And the supercycle is this 90-year phenomenon, okay? And the supercycle has its history back all the way thousands of years ago with the Etruscans. They were a people in Italy who reigned for about 1,000 years. And the Etruscans didn't base their calendars on 100 years like we do today. They based them on crisis moment to crisis moment. And what it turned out to be was every 90 years or so, there would be a crisis. And the reason the crisis happened was there was no one left alive to warn mankind of the mistakes of the past. That was the entire ideology. And this sounds kind of crazy. It sounds a little hokey, okay, until you start looking at American history. 1776, Revolutionary War. Literally, fourscore and 7 years ago, Lincoln,
Right.
talks about the saeculum, writ those words. And then 1945, a saeculum later, a supercycle later, the end of World War II. So we have these crisis moments that come roughly every 90 years. I wrote about that in the book. I was saying we're back at that place again. I write about the 5 signs that are exactly the same. And the signs are the same as we were in 1929, but it's most represented by the wealth gap. The distribution of wealth is the number one problem we have today, okay? We have 20 billionaires that are worth more than the bottom half of the world combined. That's just a math problem, okay? And every revolution is built on inequality. So change is coming, whether we like it or not. Change is probably coming in a very progressive way. And I really believe what you're going to see is modern monetary theory. You're going to see us being sold, well, it's okay to go further into debt if we print it ourselves. If interest rates are 0, this is what we need to do, and they're going to sell us, it's okay. And so whether it's the Republicans or the Democrats, we're going to get this mindset, okay? So I believe that's what's coming based on the past. But what really lit the bell off and the subject of my new model and what I'm so incredibly excited about is why. Why do these things happen? Because it's not enough to know that we're in a bubble. It's not enough to know that the signs are the same. It's not enough to know that populism is reigning again like it did back then. It's not enough to know, the same similarity until you know why.
Right.
And Neil Howe said something in an interview. It was a throwaway line. And he said, there is a supply and demand for social order. And then he went on to talk about some other things, and that just stuck with me. And I just started plotting out history.
So what does that mean, a supply and demand for social
That's a
order?
good question. Social order represents the social construct of mankind, okay? And when there's high supply of social order, it means that there's a lot of institutional oversight, okay? And when there's low supply of social order, it means that there's a lot of deregulation, a lot of it's more individual. The high supply is more progressive. Okay, it's more the collective. And so if you look at low supply and high supply being on opposite ends, well, you also have demand. And demand also has times when demand for social order is low and times when demand is high. And if you chart this out on like a T-chart, and then you look at the super cycle over the last 90 years, you find some incredible things. And so that's what I did. And we spent 6 months building this model. And what you'll see is that the reason this is coming, the why is it's like gravity, okay? The demand for social order pulls the supply. In a democracy, we vote for what is good for us. And when the demand for social order gets great in times of depression, in times of war, in times where we need a big unified response, okay, we elect leaders that come in and fill that supply. So look back 90 years ago, we had a crisis. We had a Great Depression. Okay, there was populism reigning around the world. Inequality of wealth was the greatest it's ever been in history. Back then it was the Vanderbilts and the J.P. Morgans and the Carnegies, okay? So you have this math problem, and you have this high demand for social order. And we got it. And over the next few years, we had a blue wave. And what happened when the blue wave happened with FDR? Do you remember?
No.
Yeah, well, literally happened in the middle of a banking crisis. So an election happening in the middle of a crisis. Sound familiar? We have a similar situation, an election happening in the middle of a crisis. By the way, the president, the incumbent, Hoover, was a staunch Republican, conservative, populist. He put on tariffs to bring to help the American worker. The Smoot-Hawley tariffs were passed in 1930. So we got identical looking time and president and policy then as we do now. And there was a blue wave, and you saw Congress, both the Senate, the House, and the presidency, all elected Democratic. And in the first week, they shut down the banks for 7 days. Then when they reopened, they opened with FDIC insurance. They then passed Glass-Steagall, which was massive reforms on how banks can invest money. They then passed the New Deal and all of the New Deal programs. And of course, they devalued, they made gold illegal. And with the stroke of a pen, changed the price from $20 to $36, a 40% devaluation with the stroke of a pen. That all happened in the middle of a crisis. So for those who don't want to read the book, you got a pretty good summary, but on the back of the book, it says the following quote: "What seems crazy in normal times becomes necessary in a crisis." And right now, the Federal Reserve is saying this is necessary, and we're all okay with it. But the reality is, we're about to see the baton pass. We're about to see a massive fiscal impulse, which means wiping out student debt. We're going to need a universal response to the global warming situation. We need a unified response to pandemics. They are things that require a bigger, unified approach. And so demand right now is high. Okay, social order demand is high, and we're going to see the supply come to meet it, and that is very inflationary. So if you look at this on a grid, what you'll see is over 90 years, okay? At the 9 o'clock, we have a deflationary crisis. At the 3 o'clock, we have an inflationary crisis. And what happens is the demand gets pulled either way as voted in by the people. So we had, if you look at the bottom half of this grid, you'll see it's the we, the collective, progressive, and it's blue. And if you look at the top, it's me, the individual, and it's conservative. And so there's this fine balance between social order, its supply and demand, and it's like gravity. And I think if you buy into this model, if you start to really understand, okay, where are we at on this scale? We have a deflationary crisis. That's what we have right now. We have social order where we need a big response. This is coming. And what does that mean for financial assets? Well, from 1929 to 1990, you know how much the stock market went up?
No idea.
Well, on a nominal terms, I think it went up 8 times. On a real inflation-based basis, 0%, 60 years. So inflation is terrible for financial assets. Deflation is great for financial assets. And so what we had a pull, 45 years in this inflationary pull. And then what happens at the extremes is too much of a good thing becomes a bad thing. And that's the entire thing of the pendulum. And so each of these things, when they hit their peak, that's too much, and there's a pullback in the other direction, and that's what keeps it going. And so we're going to have a new circle. If you think about life rather than linear, but more it's a circle, okay? There's a beginning, middle, and end. Everything has a beginning, middle, and end. Well, the end is a new beginning. And so we're going to have a new system. It's coming. And why I believe the monetary system is going to change dramatically is there's no one left to take the baton. Take a look at the last 570 years. Portugal, Spain, the Netherlands, France, Britain, the United States. Okay? If you look at how long each of those were the reserve currency of the world, 95 years on average. The U.S. dollar has been the de facto currency of the world since 1920 after World War I. We were the young lion. The world, Europe was decimated. We had all the gold. We had all the power. And so the dollar has been the world's trading currency for 100 years. So if you understand, monetary systems come to ends every 95 years. And then you look at all the things that are happening, well, I think it's a pretty strong bet that you're going to see the dollar drop dramatically over time. But it could drop like that. And I think that's why this election is so important. If we get that blue wave in a crisis. Now keep in mind, This is the, can I give you my conspiracy theory now?
Oh,
Do
please.
we do that on Jeff Hayes Films?
Absolutely,
Okay.
please.
So I did a documentary, Trump versus the Federal Reserve. I believe the Federal Reserve does not want to see Donald Trump reelected. I believe that he is a threat to their independence. And if you listen to what they're saying, Neil Kashkari goes on Face the Nation in August and says, we need to shut the country down. We need to get our testing right. We need to get our tracing right. Now, the Federal Reserve is adored by Democrats and Republicans, and they're powerful. I believe they're more powerful than the United States government. So controlling the dollar is what's given us our home field advantage. Okay, we've got 5% of the world's population, 25% of the world's wealth. And it's because we control the world's trading currency. So that's something we don't want to lose, but it's probably in jeopardy of being lost. But the big problem is, who do you hand the baton to? Because every other currency is in the same mess. You going to pass it to the euro? You going to pass it to Japan? Certainly, we're not going to pass it to China. They might kind of try and come take it, but we're not going to pass it to them. And so there's no one left to pass the baton to. And I think we're going to have a monetary reset. And that monetary reset is going to reprice all assets. And I think that's, what's coming in the future.
So I like this concept of monetary reset. It gives me, when I was reading about that, and you and I have discussed it a little bit, let's go into what that looks like.
Sure. So if you want to see the future that I'm writing about, that I'm thinking about, I think you're going to see the tokenization of everything. It makes too much sense. Why we're not voting on some blockchain that we can verify, we would not have any problems. There wouldn't be anyone worrying about it. We would know. That guy voted, and that's who he is. That woman voted, and that's who she is. So there wouldn't be any question. So you're going to see tokenized voting, blockchain voting. But you're going to see even more, Jeff. If you're a celebrity and you sign a big contract, okay? If you can pay a dividend, all right, you can become an investable token. You can tokenize yourself.
Right.
So I'm a new quarterback who signs a big contract, and I want to raise $50 million. Well, I can tokenize myself. People can start buying or selling my token, and as long as I pay a dividend over the course of the span of that time, well, then it's something that you can turn into an asset. And I think all assets will become currency. Buildings, people, businesses. We're going to see a tokenized world, and that's going to become the new currency. It's going to be, we're going to be able to, okay, your home's worth $400,000. Okay, great. We can, measure that, and you can actually, take a loan tokenized, and that's going to be the new currency of the future. I believe asset prices in stocks and bonds and gold and other commodities are going to be dramatically impacted by that new system. And I think you're going to see a time when food prices surge, when commodity prices surge, when financial assets struggle, because inflation really means real interest rates that are rising. And they eat away at, currency values. And I think that's what the Federal Reserve wants. The only way to pay back all this debt is with diluted dollars. So how do you pay back $27 trillion? You don't, all right? I guess you could. You could wipe it away and devalue the dollar. And I think that's what's coming. And if you know your history and you believe in this construct and you understand the wisdom of why it happens, then it doesn't become something to fear. Then it becomes something to embrace. And I think it's the same kind of thing that people who fear death, who then, have belief systems past that, start to become okay with it, right? Every end, we spend our lives, not thinking about the one thing we know is going to happen. Right? We're all going to die. I don't see life that way. I see a circle of life. And I see that, when I was doing the Gold Summit, I talked about this. I said, look, I'm 50. My daughter was just born and my mom just died. So I am the perfect kind of example of the timeline, beginning, middle, and end. But She's the new beginning. And we're going to have a new system. It's just a matter of when and how that occurs and with what kind of crisis. So we're going to have some challenging times. We are really polarized. It's going to be rocky. It's going to be volatile. But as we come out of it, I think it could be fantastic once we do.
I like that note of optimism. You know, I love the example of a chick in an egg, a baby chicken in an egg, and the chick is growing, the food supply is gone, the air is noxious, there's no room left in the egg, it's miserable, and it's the only world they've ever known. And I think of this, it's just I can just picture the chick finally giving up and saying, okay, I'm ready to die. I'm leaving my home and breaking through the egg and finding the world.
Sure.
And so
Sure.
I like the optimism.
like
It is
that too.
scary to look at as I've read your book and thought about what you're saying, I don't see, I think we can kick the can down the road a couple more times.
Yeah.
You know, and that's like my optimism is like, okay, please let this harebrained scheme just keep working for a little while longer.
Well, look, it has to. It has to. See, and that's something that we all need to be aware of. And certainly something that Wall Street's aware of. When we had the Great Depression, 1% of the population was invested in the stock market. 1%. Today, 55% of baby boomers' money is in financial assets tied to equities.
Wow.
So if we have a big collapse, we're going to see, massive financial challenges. And that's why it's so easy to buy gold, because you know the move in advance. I'll do you a different one on an animal. See, I look at it as, larvae that turn from that into a caterpillar, turn into a butterfly.
Right.
Okay? If you told me that was going to be a butterfly in 14 days, I wouldn't believe you. Gold is going to be a butterfly in 14 days. And we aren't at the egg stage. We're not even at the crawling caterpillar stage. We're at about to burst out of its cocoon stage, because this is the only solution. So it's going to be rough for those who don't change. See, we like to think about matter as something that doesn't change, but matter changes. And if you think about money and its evolution, it used to be something scarce and rare in gold. Then it became paper money, okay? And that evolution then led to, we don't need paper money. Now it's just digital transactions on a ledger. Well, it's going to continue to evolve. So it's not only evolving in form, it's evolving in mindset. And when the Federal Reserve just comes and prints money, and it's really maybe where the whole virus is a great analogy. A virus attacks a weak system, okay? A virus works in a body that has underlying conditions. We have massive underlying conditions as a country. We know it. We're very insecure because of it, okay? So just like that 75-year-old who has that coronary, he kind of knows, man, I probably should have been smoking 2 packs a day and doing the things I was doing. This is probably expected. So when I call it gradually, then suddenly. That's life. Yeah. Gradually, then suddenly. And when that sudden comes, we're all going to go, yeah. We just wish it had come later. But see, for me, why, if you know it's coming, and you know it can come at any time, why not just change? Why not change in advance? And that's what I talk to people about. The way you're doing it, there's a better way. And I'll stand by that title. In fact, it's really full circle for us, because I didn't know I could write. I wanted to put the conclusion on the cover because I believe it's better. Not that it's, something else is bad or good. This is just better. So if you want to get to the airport, sure, you can take a train, you can take a car, you can take a skateboard. You'll get there. It's probably one or two of them going to be better than the other. So I think we're entering into a time where there's a better way. And unfortunately, most investors aren't in that strategy, and they're not going to hear that strategy from Wall Street. They're just not.
So you lay out this this scenario. Is there an alternative solution? Is there something else that you see as a potential?
There could be. And in fact, Trump's most recent nominee to the board of the Federal Reserve, Judy Shelton, is actually someone that espouses a gold standard. Now, what's interesting about this is who Trump is nominating. Okay, he's got 3 other nominees that have been rejected, and now putting up Judy Shelton. She's going to get rejected because Mitt Romney and Thune and other conservatives are not going to put her on. They're not going to approve her. Okay, so she's not going to get on the board. And the reality is it's because the Federal Reserve doesn't want her on the board, and that's why they're not going to approve her. But what's so bad about thinking differently? See, they're afraid to put anyone else who doesn't think like them on their board, and that's the definition of too much of a good thing is a bad thing. The Federal Reserve is too much of a good thing right now, and they're now a bad thing. So on the gold side, how would this look? Keep in mind, the balance sheet is made up of assets. And sitting on the Fed balance sheet right now is gold. And rather than continue to add bonds and massively purchase, treasuries and mortgage-backed securities and other paper assets, they could do what other central banks are doing, which is buying gold and adding to their gold holdings. Think about it. The reason interest rates are zero, the way the Fed gets to turn that dial down there is they forward guide what they're going to buy. We're going to buy bonds. And everyone then knows, okay, we're going to buy bonds too because you got way more demand than supply. So let's just keep buying them because they're going to keep going higher. Well, if the federal open market, if the Fed did a open market operation and just said we're going to keep buying gold until gold gets to $10,000 an ounce, well, guess what would happen? Gold would get $10,000 an ounce real fast. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Gold on the Fed's balance sheet is valued at $42 an ounce. So, if you're looking for some, new manipulative things to do, which is really what the Fed does, is they manipulate. Okay, they control the money supply. It's all manipulation anyway. And the rules change every 15 years or so anyway. Okay, and I could go through them. 1933, we recall all of the gold. 1951, the power gets passed from the Treasury back to the Fed for monetary policy. 1971, Nixon closes the gold window. 1985, Plaza Accord. 1998, the bailout of long-term capital management. 2008, creation of quantitative easing. So every 15, 17 years, we got to change the rules anyway. Right. This is just a way that they could reapproach the balance sheet. But what's to stop Trump from just directing Steve Mnuchin, let's mark gold to the market price? And the balance sheet would immediately increase from $42 to whatever the price is today. Well, if it's $2,000, it would be a 50 times increase in the gold side of the ledger. And if they move gold to $10,000 an ounce, it would be about $3 trillion of real assets added to the balance sheet. And Jeff, that's where we're headed anyway, gold at that price. So an overnight move that does that is something I think is a really interesting and logical and real potential that could happen. There's only one reason not to. You know what that is?
What? That's what I was going to. Why don't they just mark to the market?
Well, there's one reason. The Fed has spent the last 100 years telling us you don't need gold, you need dollars. So if the Fed goes out and starts telling us gold is important, well, then the whole identifier of the Fed being all-knowing goes away. But think about it. They want to create inflation. they can create inflation. And you know how they can do it? Start buying a bunch of gold. So this is a solution I think is one that is already being kind of considered. Hopefully the book will help, get that story out even further. And I think it's a solution that the Fed will come to. And at this point, what seems crazy in normal times becomes necessary in a crisis. We just put $3 trillion on the balance sheet. No one's asking how we're going to pay for this. Nobody. And ultimately, it's going to be paid for through inflation. And, that's, the big thing that's coming.
Yeah, I watched, you remember in 2008, the hand-wringing over whether to create this money to solve this problem.
Sure.
And the battles back and forth. And this time, it was just, where are we going to spend it? I mean, there was all of the questions of should we do this?
Right.
It's just how much, who's going to get it?
And when Powell says we'll do everything we can to, quote unquote, keep the expansion going, he understands they can't afford to let it collapse. They can't afford to. So, okay, they're not going to let asset prices drop. They're just not going to. How are they going to do that? They're going to buy more and more and more and more and more. In fact, they're going to start buying junk bonds. They did. They're going to start buying stocks. That's coming. We're going to be Japan, which is all the tools that they've done, and ultimately we're headed in that direction. Japan, by the way, you know what they've done?
What?
They've wiped out their debt. You know how they've done it? The central bank bought all the debt for free. Now there's no more debt. It's a magic trick. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I wish I could work that at home.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the interesting thing about, the Mandrake method, right, that's talked about in The Creature from Jekyll Island, okay?
Yeah, the
Mandrake
Mandrake,
method.
the magician.
Yeah, that's what he talks about. And it's literally like taking money from your left pocket, putting it in your right pocket, and calling it new money. That's what the Federal Reserve does. So this is a game that's been played, and once you realize this is what happens to currencies and why they break apart. See, and then you think about this 90-year cycle. In the beginning, it's growth and its strength and its power because you just want a war, and now it becomes devaluing the currency, and now you're weak. And that's where we are. We're fragile. Our mindset is fragile, and a new mindset's coming.
So, we've talked about stimulus. One thing I'm curious about potential stimulus is there's a lot of conversation about universal basic income, an idea that, to me, a decade ago would have just been absurd that people were talking about.
Right.
And now it's...
Right. Well, while the Federal Reserve moved the line of scrimmage 90 yards, the whole idea of conservative and progressive has also been moved 90 yards. Okay, we already have universal basic income. We put checks into the hands of every American when the pandemic happened. Guess what? Once you do it once, it's kind of like that, what you just said about, the balance sheet and the hand-wringing that went on. Well, man, once you do it once, you do it twice, let's just keep doing it. Yeah. And so when Andrew Yang and, Mark Cuban come out and say we need to put $1,000 checks into the hands of every American every couple weeks, yeah, this is coming. This is what has to come, okay? And it's just what it gets called. So, there's going to be a lot of people that don't like that reality. We already have universal basic income. I don't think we're going to get less of it. I think we're going to get a whole lot more of it. And, right now we need it. We have massive holes in this economy. And, unfortunately, we're all living in this isn't a tragedy, this is a farce. Hey, we're living in a farce, not a tragedy, and we should laugh. And I think if you have some perspective, able to take a deep breath, able to recognize, wait a second, don't listen to Adam Barata, okay? Don't listen to me. Listen to the smartest guy who's been the smartest guy for the last, 50 years. The greatest American investor of our time is buying gold. He's selling bank stocks. I mean, let's follow that guy. And so, that all makes me feel really good about, where I'm at and what I'm recommending people. And I think you're going to see a mindset shift, and in a few years, you're going to see Wall Street recommending it like crazy.
I love your concept of a farce, and I can't help but think that 2020 is a play brought to you by Mel Brooks.
Yeah, you couldn't write a farce this outrageous than what's taking place on a daily basis. I think, Jeff, if we're going to talk politics a little bit, it's why we're so fed up. The hypocrisy is so great. And when you only do the thing that's expedient because it's good for you right then, well, you got problems. You don't stand on principle. And the Federal Reserve is in that place right now. See, I look at them doing that. This is way bigger than, Lindsey Graham saying, well, mark the tape, and then, oh no, now I'm going to change my mind. That's hypocrisy, okay? And there's hypocrisy on both sides. I'm not trying to get political in either way, but I am telling you that when the Federal Reserve loses sight of their main job, which is sound money, and we can just print away our problems, why do we pay taxes?
Yeah.
If we can just print the money, why do we need to pay taxes? A lot of big changes are coming. A lot of big changes are needed. And if you're an investor who understands these things, I think you can make fortunes in the coming years while a lot of people are suffering. But you got to move in advance. You can't wait for the wave to take you over, because then it's too late.
Yeah, there's the great line, there's never a good time for preparation. It's either too early or too late.
Yeah.
With your example with gold, I love that you've got me out of thinking of gold as preparation. That gold as a serious investment on its own, and that just happens right now to be the only place I want to be.
It's a bullish asset right now. As long as this is the mindset and where we're headed, and we're going to print away our problems, gold is a bullish asset. It's something you want to own. You want to own a lot of, and I think it's probably a good idea. So I'm on a mission to share that strategy with as many people as I can.
Well, I'm glad you are. I'm glad to be a part of that mission, and thank you so much.
Hey, this has been fun. Thank you.
Well, now you see why we needed a two-part interview with Adam Baratta. He's a wealth of knowledge. It's content and information you need to understand. It's not just knowing that gold is a tactic that you can invest in, but it's understanding the mindset, the strategy, and the world that we're in, and that informs you as to what type of position you might want to make when it comes to gold. So thanks for tuning in. I hope you got a ton of great information out of that adds to your life and your future. In financially uncertain times, people are always saying, what should I do? Should I stay in equity? Should I sell my portfolio? Should I invest in real estate? What is the bond market? What do you think of that? What do I do? I don't know what I should do. And they start thinking about all these things: gold, precious metals, crypto, all the things that we talk about. But you know what people don't talk about too often? How about investing in a business? I'm talking about a private business. When things are uncertain, there are a lot of businesses with great assets and cash flow that can be bought for a fraction of what their value truly is. My partner, Jeff Hayes, sat down with Carl Allen and had a conversation around exactly how to do that. At first, you might not think this is for you, but when you listen, you might say, maybe this is something I should be considering. I learned a lot from this interview. I know you will too. So enjoy this interview between Jeff Hayes and Carl Allen.
So, Carl, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much.
I'm looking forward to this because this is a topic that I'm fascinated by and excited to learn about. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do and how you got here?
Okay, so my name's Carl Allen. I'm originally from Manchester, England. I now spend about half my time in the States and half my time here. Kind of basically grew up as a Wall Street investment guy. So I was buying and selling businesses for lots of corporates like HP and IBM and Microsoft, GE, And then about 10 years ago, my life changed. I had a little baby, not me personally, but my wife, and I decided to become an entrepreneur and buy and sell businesses for myself, which I'm still doing to this day. But about 4 years ago, I started teaching and coaching entrepreneurs how to basically model my system, which is buying a small business from say $1 to $5 million in revenues and buying it without A, spending your own money to acquire that business, and B, once you acquire it, not having to run that business day to day if you don't want to. So those are the two things that I do. I'm still doing my own deals inside of my private equity firm that I run with a partner, and then I'm still coaching and training entrepreneurs to basically follow my system that I've been using most of my career.
So I've been a lifetime entrepreneur and have had some great successes and some spectacular failures. And Vern Harnish was saying a few weeks ago, his new mantra is that money is not in startups, it's in scale-ups. And listening to Vern, and when I found out about you, I'm like, okay, this buying a business, I look at the ideas I had that I thought were brilliant, that lost mine and my investors' money. The risk is on the takeoff much more than. So I'm eager to hear. So let's do a high-level view, and then we'll dig deeper into it. If somebody's interested in buying a business and doesn't have a lot of capital, what do they need to start with?
Yeah, so the first advice I would give to anybody that wants to get into business is don't start a business, actually buy one that someone else has built and no longer wants to own. Last year, over 6 million Americans started a company from scratch, and 96% of those will fail within a 10-year period, and 50% of them will fail inside of 1 year. And those statistics are from Michael Gerber, who's the author of The E-Myth, one of my favorite all-time business books. And he's worked with hundreds and hundreds of thousands of businesses. So, and my kind of analogy with this is like Tesla. So if you want to buy a Tesla, do you A, go and buy the wheels, buy the glass, buy the chassis, buy the giant iPad, buy the tires, and put it all on your driveway and figure out, how do I build it all? Or do you go to the dealership, buy one that they've built, and then finance the purchase of that car through Tesla, where you're paying for that car month on month? And it's the exact same thing buying a business. So rather than start a business, go and buy one that somebody else has built and no longer wants to own. There's over 2.4 million of them for sale today in the United States. Only 1 in 12, 1 in 13 are actually going to sell in the next 12 months. Lots of baby boomers, 10,000 a day, looking to retire. Big percentage of those own a small business. So if you're an entrepreneur and you want to become a business owner, go and buy a business that someone else has built and doesn't want to own anymore. And provided it's a good match to your skills and what you want to do, you can acquire that business and get somebody else to finance that deal using other people's money.
So you're talking about in the 1 to 5 million range.
Yeah.
What example businesses are we talking about? Is this like a dry cleaners, or what are we talking about?
So no, we're looking more kind of, there's not many dry cleaners that are doing $1 million a year as a standalone. You could buy 20 of them and kind of roll them up into a group, but we're looking at more kind of established, developed businesses. So in the engineering, in the manufacturing sector, anything in technology or software, anything in professional services, so PR firms, recruitment consultancies, web design, marketing agencies, those types of businesses. And you can also do deals, although I personally don't like doing deals in retail or buying hotels or restaurants, the kind of leverage buyout model that we utilize, very, very old 64-year-old Wall Street tool, still being used today. That's how we're doing these deals. But you can pretty much do deals in any particular sector. The 1 to 5 million range, or you could maybe go as high as 10, those two boundaries are quite important. Anything below $1 million, then really, or kind of maybe $500,000 at a stretch, you're not really buying a business. You're buying somebody that has a job inside of their own business. So when they leave, they take all the goodwill and all the kind of mechanics of how the business works. So those deals are not very good deals to do. When you go above 5 million in revenues and even kind of maximum 10 million, there's a lot more competition for those types of businesses. You have private equity firms and you have a lot of trade competitors that would buy a business at that scale. So our kind of 1 to 5 million market, that's really our sweet spot where we're finding lots of really good high quality deals.
And where do you find these businesses?
Yeah, so there's lots of proprietary methods that I've developed over the past 26, 27 years I've been doing this. So we go to business brokers like everybody else, but we'll only typically work with a deal where it's been listed with a broker, say at least 9 months, because business brokers, most of them, they're not very good, some of them are okay, but they're in the market really to sell a business to another business. They're not interested in selling those businesses to people like ourselves because they promise quite crazy valuations with sellers, and we're obviously coming in and we're looking to do more sensible, creative deals. Apart from business brokers, most of our deals come through our network. So building our network of both deal intermediaries like CPAs and lawyers and wealth managers and accountants, but also a lot of the people that we know in industry. And anybody can do it. You can build your own network, whether it's on LinkedIn or going to events or other types of networking activity. And if you're a small business owner and you've decided the time's come maybe to sell the business, only 20% of sellers ever go to a business broker because it's very expensive and takes a lot of time. Most people, they call their own network. They'll call their wealth manager because the wealth manager is going to be then investing the money if they sell. They'll call their lawyer or their attorney. They'll call their CPA because those are the individuals that are going to help them get that deal to market and get it closed to somebody else. So if you're an entrepreneur looking to buy a small business and you're networking with those types of individuals, it's a great way to get some very high quality deal flow. And it's what we call off market, which means that it's not published on a website somewhere where hundreds and thousands of people can see it. It's a one-on-one kind of situation. And what's great about that is that, like anything in life, businesses are bought and sold between people. So a massive part of our system and how we teach it is a lot about the psychology of the seller and the psychology of how they think and what they're looking for when they sell their business. And the interesting thing is, it's not always about money. It's about other things.
So let's talk about financing for a minute. It's like because that, in your Tesla example, I don't want the car assembled in the driveway. Much rather buy it at the dealership. But if they didn't have a financing mechanism for me, then suddenly I'm not in the market for a Tesla.
Yep.
So how do you help people finance businesses?
So there's 4 countries in the world that have got very, very mature financing markets for buying businesses. So obviously the USA is by far the biggest, the UK is next, and then you have Canada and Australia. There are other parts of the world that do these types of deals, but if you went to, say, South America or India or China, it's very, very hard to get that type of financing. But in the Western world, there's trillions of dollars available to put into deals. So when we're looking to buy these businesses, we're typically using 3 types of financing. The first one that we always try and use in a deal is seller financing. So it's like buying the business, like leasing to buy it. So you're not raising any money from the financial markets. So let's say you owned a business and it was doing $1 million a year in revenues and it was making $100,000 a year in profit. And I was buying that business for, say, a 3 times multiple of profit, which is about the average, maybe a bit less. So that 300,000, I could say to you, I will buy that business from you and I will pay you for that business over, say, 5 years. So you don't have to come into work anymore. I will take over your business and run your business and grow it, but you still get paid month on month as if you were coming into work. And for a lot of baby boomers and a lot of retiring entrepreneurs or other business owners, that's still quite an attractive proposition, that somebody's taken over their business, dealing with all the problems that business has on a daily basis. But as the owner, the old owner, they can stay in bed or go play golf or go on vacation and still make the money that they've been used to making. Because a lot of business owners stay in their businesses far too long, A, because they can't sell them, and B, they still want the income from that business to be able to live their lives. The second thing that we do is, apart from the seller financing, and sometimes it's enough to be able to just pay the seller from the future profits of the business, in my private equity firm, we're buying a coach company up in the northern elements of Scotland. Fantastic deal. We're raising no financing from the outside market. We're just paying for that business every month over 5 years, and the seller is more than happy to do that deal. If that seller wanted say a closing payment, then we would be looking at using the assets in the business or the cash flows in the business to be able to introduce some financing from an external provider. So it could be an asset-based lender, it could be an angel investor, or it could be the SBA. What you have in the United States, which is phenomenal, we don't have it in the UK or anywhere else, is you've got something called the SBA 7A loan program, which is rocket fuel for entrepreneurs buying businesses. The SBA will lend you 90%, up to 90% of the purchase price of a business, up to $5 million. You just have to come up with the 10% deposit, which if you've got the cash, you can put that in. If the business has got surplus cash inside of it, you can use some of that, or you can partner with an angel investor that will put that little bit of that 10% in and allow you to buy that business really without using your own money, which is kind of the mantra that we're doing inside of our business.
So how hard is it to qualify for one of these SBA?
So SBA, you need a credit rating, I believe, of around 690. We're actually doing an SBA deal right now inside of our private equity firm. We're buying a phenomenal e-learning business in Texas, which is going to be a phenomenal deal. And then we're going to roll that up into a much larger opportunity. So to qualify for SBA, you need to have some knowledge and understanding of the market, which I believe is very, very important for any entrepreneur buying a business. If you've spent your life or you've spent 10 years working, say, in web design, then go and buy a web design company or an IT services company. Don't go and buy a restaurant or a hotel or a laundromat. Buy something that's kind of in your lane. So the SBA want to see that you've got some industry experience. You have to have reasonably good credit if you want to apply for an SBA loan. And that's the only time when you're doing a deal where your own individual credit as the buyer actually comes under scrutiny. When you're using other types of financing, so you're financing the balance sheet or you're using other types of investment, then really the financier is more concerned about the credit of the business that's being funded, not the credit of the individual that's going to be coming in to become the business owner. But the SBA is rocket fuel. It is a complex process. It does take a lot longer by doing SBA, but they give you a huge chunk of money to be able to put down on that deal. And like with any seller, the more money you can pay them at closing, the smaller the total amount of the deal is going to be, just because of the time, value of money. So it's very important.
Yeah, it would seem to be a strong negotiating point to be able to offer that. And what's the length? You say it's a lengthy process.
Yeah.
What is lengthy in this case?
So if we hadn't had the government shutdown quite recently, because the SBA is a federal government agency, the Small Business Administration, when the president shut down the government however many months ago, there was a huge backlog. So I think our deal is probably going to take start to finish around 3 months from the provider that we've definitely decided to go with. So it's generally about a 3-month process. If you're financing a deal through traditional methods, you're just calling a bank and looking to borrow against receivables or real estate or inventory or fixed assets inside of the balance sheet of the business, then typically it's a lot faster, 30 to 45 days normally. But generally, start to finish, when you're buying a business, you're looking at 90 to 100 days before you start searching, you find a business, you start having meetings, you do your due diligence, you apply for the financing, and then the lawyers come in and the CPAs and do the due diligence for you, which is making sure that the business does what it says on the tin. Start to finish, about 90 to 100 days. If you're doing it part-time, if you were hitting it full-time, it was the only thing that you were doing in your career, you can do it a little bit faster, generally around 45 to 50 days.
So you said something really compelling to me at the very beginning, that you look for businesses to buy that are good businesses, but that you don't have to run.
Yes.
And that's a very
Yeah.
because when you're talking about somebody often business owners are working in their business, and these are businesses that are large enough that there's some infrastructure.
Yeah.
How do you acquire a business but not end up acquiring a job?
Yeah, so there's two elements to that. I think first of all, you still really have to have some knowledge and understanding of an industry that you're looking to acquire in as an owner investor versus an owner manager. There's no harm. There's no reason why you can't buy a business and go in and run it. There's thousands of students that we're coaching inside of our programs, and about a third of those, they actually want to go and buy a business, and they want to go in and they want to run it 9 to 5 or day to day. That's fine if you only want to buy one business. If you want to build a portfolio of businesses, then you can't multiply and scale yourself. You have to become more of an owner investor. So you still need to know the sector, because it's really important to build rapport and trust and credibility with the seller of the business, and also with any external financiers if your deal needs that financing. So knowing the space is really still quite important. But then once you are going through that acquisition process, then really you're looking for a GM. You're looking for a number two that can effectively run that business day to day for you. And that could be someone that you can promote internally from within the business. The e-learning company that I'm acquiring inside of my PE fund with my partner in Texas, that has a phenomenal number two, a general manager. He's been there over 20 years, since just after the company was founded. We're going to make him the CEO, and he's going to be like a small profit interest partner for us inside of that deal. So having somebody like that, or if there isn't anyone inside of that business, then you can use your network, which I mentioned earlier. Having a network's really important for doing these types of deals. Then you can bring somebody in to that deal to be your general manager. And what's great is, because you're buying the business without using your own money, so you're buying the shares in the business essentially for free, you can gift a small percentage of the ownership to that GM, which then effectively means they're incentivized and they're really vested in helping you grow that business. And then if you don't know anybody in your network that you can bring in, and there's nobody inside of the business, then you can use a recruitment consultancy, or use LinkedIn, or do other online methods to find the ideal partner. And what's great about having a partner in a deal is not only are they there as your kind of wingman to run that business for you once you've acquired it, they can also help you do that deal as well. There's a couple of people inside of our programs that we met recently at one of our events, and one was a phenomenal marketer that had a passion for doing engineering deals but knew nothing about the sector. He met somebody at that event who didn't really want to go through the work of closing the deal, but really, he had the grey hair, really knew that space. So those guys have partnered, and they've closed one deal, I think almost now maybe two, and they've got 3 other deals that they're doing. So that's another way that you can kind of partner with people. One can do the deal, one can run the business for you, and then scale that up and kind of combine all of your experiences and all of your efforts.
So I knew you were training people. I didn't know you were doing events. And that's, a couple of things you've said. The old line, your network is your net worth.
Yeah.
And this is where, when people come to me and go, and want to do something, I always look around. It's the part of the iceberg that's under the water is the relationships that you make.
Yes.
So I love it that you're doing events.
Yeah.
Are you bringing a bunch of your students together at
Yeah.
the same time? And
Yeah.
It's a beautiful place to build a network.
Yeah, it is. And obviously we have different levels and tiers inside of our various programs, but our academy members and our partner members that we work with, we typically get them all together. The last one that we did was in London. There was about 50 people there. We did one in San Diego quite recently. There was about 30 people there. And we're not only coaching them in the room with lots of new advanced things that we're doing. One of the things that we also do, which is, really makes my heart sing, is when I worked back on Wall Street and in corporate life and I was doing deals, whenever you closed a big deal, they used to give you, it's called a tombstone, which is like a really weird thing because that sounds like death, but you get like a crystal cut tombstone with your name and the date and the terms of the deal that was done. So we've started doing that with some of our students, and these are ordinary people that were stuck in a corporate 9 to 5 or had been laid off and just wanted more money and freedom, and and kind of pride in becoming a business owner, we get all those people to our events that have gone through our programs, and we hand them their deal tombstones live in front of the rest of the audience. And there's kind of two reasons that we do that. One is we want to celebrate with our successful students that have implemented and have got the results that they wanted to do by following our programs. But we also do it as a big kind of incentive for the people in the room that haven't done a deal. Because people can look at me and think, well, obviously Carl knows how to do deals. He's been doing it for 27 years. But when they can look at somebody, like there's a gentleman called Costin, who's now a very good friend of mine, came from Africa to the UK literally only 3 years ago. And when he got here, didn't even have enough money to feed his family. He's since bought 5 businesses leveraging our program. His son's go to private schools. He travels all over the place. And they'll look at him and think, well, he's like I was 3 months ago. If he can do it, I can do it. So we use that, for a lot of kind of inspirational building for the other members that we invite that are kind of quite new, or they've maybe got a little bit stuck throughout their journey, because they can see other people taking action and doing their own deals. It's a massive incentive for them to keep going.
So because you have experience now training other people to do it,
Yeah.
who have you discovered should not do this? Is there a failure profile of people
Yeah.
that...
It's a really, really good question, actually. What I think separates the real winners from the people that just don't succeed, and you find this in any kind of coaching scenario, and it saddens me that 100% of the people that subscribe to a course, or they come onto a training program and they go to a seminar, 90% of those people will never implement anything that they learn. And I think that's crazy. Although personally, I've been to events, I've bought things, I've done stuff, and I've never implemented them. And the reason for that is because I didn't have the leverage. I didn't have the purpose or the why or the fuel to want to change my life in that particular instant by implementing that program. So what I would say is all the people that have been really successful, they've had a burning desire to want to get out of their current situation and become a business owner. It could be that they're stuck in a 9-to-5 and they hate their boss, or they're tired of not earning enough money, or they don't have a work-life balance. They're stuck in the office every day, missing their schools, their son's recitals at schools and soccer games and stuff. So what I find when I look at all the successful people that have come through our programs, they all had real leverage to want to change and go from being an employee to an employer. So I think to answer your question, for people that don't really have that burning desire to want to buy a business, that's why they fail.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and for some people, it can be an intellectual exercise, and if it
Yeah.
gives them pleasure, then God bless them. I'm thinking of nightmare stories of people. So I want to go back. You mentioned very quickly the due diligence of having lawyers and accountants go in. Can you highlight that a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you look at the process of buying a business, it's like buying a house. You go, you find one that you like, you build up a conversation with the seller, you make an offer, maybe do a little bit of arm wrestling, and you agree a price. Then, like buying a house, you'd go and get a survey done, you'd make sure that there's no dry rot, and no one's going to build a highway through the door or a nuclear power station at the back of your yard. It's the same with buying a business, but you don't want to do it yourself. You want to hire a CPA and a lawyer to basically go through the numbers and go through the legals and make sure that that business is doing exactly what it says that it's doing, that they've paid their taxes on time, that their financials are true and accurate, that their business model works the way that they say it does, that there's no pending litigation, they're not being sued by anybody, they don't have any employee issues. And that's what CPAs and attorneys will do. They'll go through that business and make sure that everything is tickety-boo, as we say in the UK. And if it's not, what the seller has to do when they're selling a business is they have to sign a warranty to basically indemnify the buyer from anything that could go wrong with the business that they haven't disclosed as part of that due diligence. So very, very important. And what's great about working with CPAs and attorneys is in most cases, once you've found a deal and you've got an agreed term sheet to buy the business, you've been to a financial services company, you've got a term sheet for the financing that you need to do the deal, if the deal actually needs any financing. Once all that's in place, you can package that up give it to a CPA and to an attorney, and in most cases they will do the closing work for you to paper the deal, and you can pay them from the business once you've closed it. It's called a contingent fee, and it's how the deal making world tends to work, not just at the massive kind of Wall Street level where I basically learnt my chops in this business, but also kind of in the small $1 to $5 million deal range that we're really playing in now.
That's great. So what kind of businesses are you personally in your private equity? What's catching your eye? What are you doing?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, so it's not necessarily a sector-specific strategy. You know, we're fairly sector agnostic, although, you know, we wouldn't buy a restaurant. Although my business partner, Adam, and I were actually investing in our favorite little restaurant in Baltimore. But that's more of a passion project, more than an LBO. So, you know, we wouldn't buy hotels or retail stores or anything like that. Apart from that, we're keen to look at any deal in any sector. What we do look for, though, which is really, really important, is we're looking for a distressed seller of a good business, not the other way around. There are plenty of good sellers of distressed businesses that are not making any money. They have, you know, not very strong balance sheets, not very good customer reputation. We want a business that's really solid. It's not declining. It's at least got kind of flat revenues, or it's growing. It's profitable. It's got a strong balance sheet. It's got a good customer base, good product, good reputation in the market. But it's the seller of that business that's distressed. They either want to retire, they could be sick, sadly they could be dying in some cases, which is awful, or they could just be burnt out or tired or frustrated, or they've just run out of ideas inside of their business, and they're essentially, you know, they've checked out of that business in their mind. It's just a case of them getting that deal done. And sadly, most business owners that get into that space end up just turning the lights off, closing the doors and walking away. And unfortunately, letting their employees go and letting their customers down, and in some cases having to pay money out of their retirement to actually shut the business down because the business has got liabilities and leases and bank loans and all those different things. It's actually a lot easier and cheaper for them to give it to somebody like me for $1, and I can keep running the business and taking it forward. So that's what we're really looking for. It's that good business that's got that kind of highly motivated seller that's really keen to kind of exit and go and do something with the rest of their life. And it's not necessarily a retiree, even though, as I mentioned before, there's 10,000 baby boomers retiring every day, and according to Forbes, 19% of them own a small business. So you've got 1,900 businesses every single day coming to market to be sold just in the United States. But what we're really looking for is just that kind of distressed seller that wants that trusted, safe pair of hands to take their business and kind of, it's like giving away your child. You know, I don't know if you've ever had to give away like an animal. Like I had a dog once, and I was moving from a house, and I was getting divorced, I was moving from a house and moving into an apartment, and sadly, you know, I couldn't take my dog with me. So I didn't want to take the dog out the back and shoot it, put it down. I wanted to rehome that dog with a loving, caring family that would give my dog a wonderful rest of its life. And for a lot of business owners, it's the same kind of feeling. They want to make sure that their business outlives them and goes to the next level. It's all about their kind of legacy and their kind of love and support for the employees that have been there to help them build that business. If you sell the business to a safe pair of hands, then they're really fulfilling that requirement.
So, Carl, I read your bio, and you've got a really rich business history.
Thank you.
So I can see how someone could be watching you talk and go, okay, it's a great idea. I can see how it can be done. I can see how Carl can do it.
Yeah.
Is it really feasible that an everyday guy can do what
The average
what you
Joe.
do? Yeah.
Absolutely. So as long as they've got a little bit of business understanding and they're trying to do deals in sectors that they know and they understand, then really the rest is all about mindset. It's all about your purpose and your why. You know, I've mentioned before the likes of CoSton, and there's Wayne Tika and Chris Matthews and all the kind of students that have come through our program. They wanted to buy businesses because they wanted to get out of whatever they were currently doing. So they were in a 9-to-5 they didn't like. They wanted to make more money. They wanted more control over their career and their life. They wanted a work-life balance so they could spend more time with their family and do those different things. So it's all really about the mindset. And people look at me and think, well, he's been doing this all of his life. He knows how to do deals. He's worked on Wall Street. He's got all these qualifications. It makes no difference. If you understand how business really works and you know the particular sector that you want to go in, the rest of it is all about mindset, and it's giving yourself enough leverage to take you out of what you're currently doing and to become the buyer and the owner of a business. Because what's interesting is people actually, they don't want to buy a business. They actually don't want to own a business. They want the benefits of what owning a business means for them, whether it's money, whether it's pride, whether it's that work-life balance, and some of the other benefits that owning a business can give you when you go from an employee to an employer.
Yeah, we talked with Robert Kiyosaki's accountant,
Yeah.
and his number one tax advice is to own a business. There are many benefits to owning a business.
Yeah.
You talked about mindset, and the mindset of the potential business owner. But I'm thinking about the mindset of the seller. And so you mentioned this briefly, but I want the psychology that seems to be really important to. If I'm not paying this seller his best price at all cash up front, I think the exchange. Can you talk to us about how you work through that?
Yeah, absolutely. So imagine two identical businesses. So they have the same product or service, they're in the same building, they've got the same employees, and they've got the exact same financial profile. Those businesses are completely identical. The only difference is the psychology of the owner of that business. So this guy could be a 30-year-old entrepreneur. He's having a lot of fun. He's running that business. Every business is for sale for the right price. If you had $1 trillion, you can go and buy Google or Facebook. But this entrepreneur, he might want to sell for a much higher price, and he wants most of that money at closing. So the same business could be run by somebody that wants to retire. They could be under ill health, or they're just frustrated and pretty much done with the business. That person might even let you take that business on and just pay them over time, or pay them a much smaller amount of money at closing using the financing that's inside of the business. So those deals, small deals, they're really 90% psychology and 10% numbers. When you're working on like $100 million deal, and I did lots of those back in my corporate life, they're 90% numbers and only 10% psychology. Those are processes of financial engineering. So really, when I talked before about the perfect seller, it's that distressed seller, that highly motivated seller of a really solid business. They're not necessarily financially motivated. They might want a little bit of money, especially paid over time, but for them it's about, can they find a buyer that's going to protect their legacy and basically take their business to the next level, and they'll cheer them on from the sidelines. My first deal that I ever did, my first very first LBO deal when I came out of the corporate world, kind of encapsulates that point. So when I changed my career from being a corporate slave, which I think I was, to an entrepreneur, I decided to become a business broker. So this was back in 2008. And I set myself up as a business broker. And my first deal that I got to basically sell to somebody else was a transport company. So I went down there and I met the two owners, Colin and Alan. They were the owners of the business. And they said, well, you sell the business for us. We want a lot of money. We want to retire, yada, yada, yada. So I created the kind of sales prospectus, the document, started contacting lots of larger companies. So really, if you own a business, it should be quite easy to sell that business to a larger competitor that you've got. And that's what I did. So I contacted a lot of those businesses. I went and made my pitch. And then one of them came back with a really attractive offer to buy the business. So the brothers were really happy. They were going to both get a couple of £1 million each. Very, very happy. And the kind of deal went through. So they were doing due diligence and doing all the various work. And it was the night before the closing of the deal. So this was the Thursday night. And I'm in my office in my house. I worked from home back in the day. and I'm just going through the checklists and making sure I've got all my ducks in a row because it was the closing day tomorrow. And it's about 8 o'clock at night, and Colin rings me. And this is a big, gruff, kind of north of England man in his 60s, and he was crying. I said, "What's the matter?" He said, "We've pulled the deal." And all of a sudden, my heart sank, because as a business broker, you make most of your money on a contingent fee when the business sold. So instantly, I just lost 200 grand as my fee for closing this deal. I said, why not? Why aren't you going through with the deal? He said, "Well, come down and talk to me." So I went down into the business, and the whole team was there. There's about 45 people there. They brought all the drivers in. They'd had a big meeting to basically decide that they didn't want to go through with the sale, because the trade buyer, the competitor, the larger business that was coming in, was basically going to gobble them up, asset strip it, get rid of all the employees. All they wanted was the trucks and the customers. They didn't want anything else. And the legacy that these two brothers had built over 35 years, they'd gone through some really painful times starting and growing and making that business successful. All their employees had supported them. They didn't want to see their life's work disappear in a puff of smoke, and then to go and retire and sit on a beach sipping cocktails, knowing that their employees couldn't make their mortgage payments, couldn't put food on the table. So they pulled the deal. And they looked at me and said, "You've got to go out, Carl, you've got to find somebody that's not going to do that. It could be an individual. It could be a small management team that you can find that can come and that can buy our business." And I don't know what possessed me. I'm stood there, all these faces are looking at me, and I said, "I'll buy your business." And then I thought, what have I just said? "I'll buy your business." And they looked at me and said, "Well, you don't know anything about this industry. You're a business broker." I said, "I know, but I know enough because I've been working on this deal for 6 months. I know how your numbers work. I know how you make money. I know how you recruit customers. I know how your supply chain and all your logistics works. I know everything about your business. I will buy your business. Now, I'm not going to be able to offer you anywhere close to what the competitor was offering you, but if you'll allow me, I'm going to use your balance sheet, the value of your trucks, the real estate. I can raise some money. I'll pay you that as a closing payment, and then I'll pay you so much per month over 3 years." And I looked at the operations manager, I looked at the head of sales, and I looked at the financial controller, and I said, "I'm going to give each one of those three 10% of the company, and we'll run it together." And he looked at me and he said, "I'll give you 30 days. If you can make that work, you can have the business." And everybody started cheering and applauding. They were like, "Great." And we did that deal. That was my first ever leverage buyout deal as an individual. And basically, it was just circumstance. If the trade buyer would have gone through with that deal, I probably wouldn't be doing this today. I'd still be a business broker. So yeah, that was my first ever deal. And the kind of moral of that story is 79%, and I did my own survey on this, 79% of small business owners don't necessarily want to sell for financial reasons. Some of them do. Our system weeds those people out. They want to sell their business for other reasons. They want that safe, trusted pair of hands, bit like the dog story, that can take their business and take it to the next level, safeguard the employees, protect the legacy that they've built inside of the business, and basically take that business to the next level.
That's terrific. Inside that, you mentioned a good buyer for a business is one of their competitors.
Yeah.
And I know this is something you're starting to do.
Yeah.
Helping entrepreneurs grow their own business through acquiring. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. If you look at the kind of first-time entrepreneur, their pain and frustration is they're trapped at a 9 to 5, they want more money, time, freedom, all those different things. If you own a business already, you can double the size of your business and more in one day by acquiring a business that's either directly competing with you, so going down the street and buying your nearest competitor. You can buy a company that's in a complementary market. So if you own a software company, you can go and buy a hardware company, and you can sell the software to the hardware customers and vice versa. So you're doubling your business, and at the same time, as you bring two businesses together, there are lots of duplicate costs that you can take out of your combined operation, namely the cost of your premises and insurance and Maybe not all of the employees will want to stay. There's lots of things, lots of costs that you can take out. And what you can also do is, if say you're a manufacturer, you can buy companies in your supply chain. So if you're making like steel components and a lot of your stuff goes out in say a cardboard box, you could buy the box manufacturer, and you can buy all those different things. If you own a hotel, go and buy a dry cleaning business, because then that can serve both sides of the businesses that you're in. So there's lots of reasons why small businesses will buy other businesses, because it solves three of their biggest challenges. Number one, it's becoming harder to grow a business customer by customer. If you've got 1,000 customers today and it's took you 10 years to get to that point, you can add another 1,000 in 90 days by just going and buying another business. As well, when you bring those businesses together and there's a lot of cost savings to be made, then you're going to increase the cash flow that's going through your business. That's another challenge that a lot of small businesses have. But maybe the even biggest challenge is it's becoming really difficult for small business owners to find and retain really good talent, really good people, which is why a lot of small business owners, they don't really have a business, they just have a job in their own business. They're doing all the work inside of that business. They're working in their business when they should be working on their business. So by buying another small business, you've maybe got a ready-made general manager that can come in and run the combined operation, so that then really you can become like a deal maker CEO. You can come in and just work on your business and be looking at joint ventures, other deals, and not having to worry about the day-to-day kind of operations of the business.
Brilliant. Carl, I can't thank you enough for being here. I really appreciate you
My pleasure.
sharing
Thank
your
you.
experience.
Thank you.
I was so happy to bring you a unique look at a consideration that many people don't have when it comes to finances and wealth and their future. So thanks for tuning into this interview. I hope it expanded your mind, your thinking, and opened up a world of new possibilities to you. Next up is my interview with Stephen Gardner. This is really interesting. His story is interesting. He's somebody that kind of went from zero to hero at a startling pace. Stephen has a background in financial planning, financial management, etc. But he also is one of the leading experts on the stimulus money that's been coming out. And as he started to share that expertise on YouTube, his YouTube channel blew up. He went from having, I think he said, under 100 YouTube followers to now several 100,000, just under 1 million YouTube followers. So there's kind of two benefits in this interview. Learn about stimulus, because a lot of that might be applicable to you, but also learn about what it means to blow up a YouTube channel. Maybe you have something you could share with people, and suddenly you can build a big audience, because when you have that audience, you can monetize it in really big ways. So enjoy this interview with Stephen Gardner. Stephen, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I think it's going to get kind of interesting. So tell me, how'd you get to be doing what you're doing right now?
So my background is doing retirement planning for people, and I've authored a few books, and someone mentioned to me, hey, you should start putting out content on YouTube, because nowadays people just don't read as much as they used to. And I had been on YouTube since 2008 and had not really given it the proper attention. But it was starting to grow, and I was having fun. And then all of a sudden, I was like, okay, wait a minute. I can see this new trend moving online, moving to video, these short 10-minute news clips about the stock market or how to get out of debt or grow your money. And so once I switched to talking about these financial topics that people were curious about, and most people are, I don't want to say uneducated, but our system, our government, our schools don't focus on educating people on this information. And so I just took it on myself to move from the publishing world to the content creation world on YouTube. And from there, it just started to grow and build to the point where now, as of today, I have a YouTube community of over 730,000 people.
Wow. What do you attribute that to? Why are they suddenly wanting to watch your 10-minute videos?
Well, I'm good at pattern recognition, and so I had never been through any kind of YouTube course or been to any kind of training or anything like that, a seminar. I just started seeing what were other YouTube channels doing as far as their thumbnail or their title or the information that they were sharing. And the big one that stood out to me was give people what they want, right? And so if I'm talking to them about things that they don't care about, then my views are going to be low. And so as we started to go into this coronavirus lockdown, I went through some personal things where it was like, okay, wait a minute, these topics are super important to me. I'll bet you that they're important to other people as well. And so topics like stimulus check, what's the government doing? What are the coronavirus numbers? What's happening with Wall Street and the stock market? And so I just started finding the topics that caught people's attention the most, and then I just took it on myself to do hours and hours of research each day and try to boil it down into 10 minutes or less. And when I started doing that, it was like attaching myself to a rocket ship. I mean, I had to really hold on and get thick skin. I wasn't used to the meanness, the meanness that comes with, being in the public eye, or some people might say at a level of being a celebrity. All of a sudden, it was like my teeth were important, my hair was important, my glasses, the clothes I was wearing, the words I was saying, and all of a sudden, I had to like step back and go, okay. Don't take any of this personal. Just deliver to the people what it is that they're looking for. And so I decided from the outset that I was going to be informative, I was going to be truthful, and I was going to be compassionate. And those three pillars, as I've moved through the last 7 or 8 months of 2020, I think is what has propelled my community to be as large as it is today.
Is this a career change for you? I mean, is this now a new thing?
It could be. It could be, but I still do my day-to-day. I still do financial coaching. I still help people with their investments, with building tax-free wealth. So I've still continued to do that, but I've had to learn how to be better at time management, dial in how much attention I'm giving different areas. But right now, I could quit everything I'm doing and do YouTube and provide for my family.
So tax-free, investing, all the things that you just enumerated, all are concerns right now with COVID, right? And obviously you've been, I guess, following the trends and reporting on the trends, which is why people are watching you. So what should people be doing right now? I'm sure there's not one answer for everybody, but give me some of the things that you're communicating to your own clients and maybe what you see as interest on YouTube as far as people really responding to and commenting on.
Okay.
What do we need to be thinking about?
Yeah, so we saw this big drop in the market in March, and then this V-shaped recovery. Almost everybody that I talk to, if they didn't panic, they're back to where they were. This thing was unlike 2007 and 8 when the market dropped by 50% and took 5.5 years to get back to break even. This was a big drop, and then it's basically kind of hockey pucked back, if you will, or hockey sticked back, if you will. But the two things that I've been focusing on that have caught people's attention is what is there outside of a 401k. Wall Street has done an incredible job of making people believe that the 401k is the only way to retirement. Wall Street is the only way to retirement. And so if they believe that, then that's where they end up putting the majority of their money. Right. And so they go into these 401ks not understanding them. There's no active management. There's no training on that. And so they're inside of something that they literally don't know how to control or manage for the most part, but they sometimes get an employer match, or they get to defer some of the tax that they are going to eventually pay down the road. So the 401k has really, for me, come into the spotlight for my community, where it's like, okay, wait a minute. If you had an emergency or an opportunity outside of Wall Street, you have to take a 30% hit on your money to touch your own money. Like, in what world is it okay that you have to lose that much to access your own asset? Now, with the CARES Act, they wrote in a little paragraph where you can remove the 10% penalty through the end of the year, but still, people end up having to pay 10 or 20% in taxes in order to touch their own money. So the 401k and the proper use of a 401k and what's outside of a 401k that could be lucrative, that's all new information to a lot of people.
And it's interesting because I guess what happens is people, like, the 401k money is like put away money, but a lot of people find themselves out of work. They find that they have challenges financially because of COVID that didn't exist before. And now, as you said, they get hammered if they try to access their own savings. And interesting, and I guess a lot of people are probably interested to know about the 10% being waived right now as a part of the CARES Act. So are there other things that you picked up in like the varying stimulus packages or CARES or the CARES Act that people should know about, maybe that they don't know about, that could be helpful for them?
Yeah, that's a big one. If you are needing access to money because not only are people, we're having significantly high unemployment, and they're worried about, is that unemployment check going to arrive? And I know people, it took 11 weeks. They went 11 weeks with no income, no cash flow in order to get that. So you can tap into your qualified money plans like an IRA or a 401k right now with no 10% penalty, which is huge. The other thing that people need to know is, let's say you have $100,000, right? If you needed to take out $10,000 for something, they're probably going to hold back $1,000, maybe $2,000, and they're going to send that to the IRS on your behalf. So it's not like you're going to take that money and then in next April you're like, oh no, how do I pay that tax money, right? They're going to send that off on your behalf right now. So this worry about liquidating a part of your 401k in the event of an emergency kind of goes away if you know that Uncle Sam's going to be taken care of and you're not going to be penalized for accessing your own money.
And you said there's also other things outside of 401ks that you think people should be thinking about when it comes to the retirement investing. And in our series here, there's a lot of people who, for reasons you cited, are pretty anti 401k. So what do you recommend?
So a few years ago, Robert Kiyosaki, he's a mentor that I've taken on. He doesn't know that he's a mentor to me, but he said something a few years ago that kind of caught me off guard, and now I've seen that come to fruition, where he said, one of the biggest risks going into the 21st century is actually being an employee, not having income from a side hustle or from owning your own business or creating something online, some kind of online business. By not having those things, he felt like that was actually one of the bigger risks. And now, with 20, 30, 40 million people being laid off, depending on when you look at the calendar, those people, I think, are having their eyes open that, wait a minute, I need to have some kind of additional stream of income. The average wealthy person has about 7 streams of income, and the average employee has 1. Maybe a second one, but this idea of only having 1 income, and it depends on whether your company that you're working at can survive some kind of emergency, that was very eye-opening to a lot of people. And so this idea of controlling your own income controlling your own future, I think is really been very eye-opening to a lot of people right now.
Have you brought that to your YouTube audience, that particular concept, to speak to them about that? And if so, what kind of questions and comments did you get?
Yeah, I get it, but on a smaller level, where a lot of my people are so focused on unemployment or that stimulus check. It's hard when somebody feels desperate to open their eyes and shift them. So I've had to do it slowly. I'll introduce things like, okay, here's my favorite book, Richest Man in Babylon. Or, hey, during the Great Recession, when I was getting my own butt kicked, a book that was given to me, Think and Grow Rich, had a huge influence on my thinking, had a huge influence on my self-esteem. It provoked me to go out and create these other streams of income. So I try to put ideas like that into the community, but it is a little bit slow at times, simply because if somebody is worried about how am I going to pay rent or groceries, or do I pay rent and then go hungry, it's a little bit hard to start having those conversations. But yes, I am bringing that information, and I want to bring even more of that information to the community.
What do you think the future of stimulus is? I mean, we're in the midst of this thing right now. We're, at the time of this recording, just about to have a presidential election. God only knows. And I think you were mentioning earlier before we started the interview that there's ads that run on your YouTube channel that you're not responsible for, but people are associating you with them. So the polarizing nature of this election, and stimulus is a battle right now. So what do you think is going to happen, or do you have any idea what you think might happen?
So politics has absolutely weaponized this $1,200 check. So in my world, there's something called clickbait, where you can throw up a title on YouTube in order to get clicks, but it's a total lie, right? And I don't do any of that, which I think has led to a lot of success, a lot of trust, I should say, with my community. But this idea of a $1,200 check, it's scary to think that within a 60-day period, over 30% of the country became dependent on the government overnight. That's very scary. And so now we've got to build our way back out of it. But this idea of a stimulus check or a federally boosted unemployment money week to week, these two things, the politicians have absolutely weaponized this. So you have on the Democrat side, in May of this year, they released what's called the HEROES Act. Well, they were the first mover, and they released this $3.4 trillion bill, which, after you go through it, is completely full of pet projects and things that had nothing to do with COVID or the lockdown. And so the Republicans are now pushing against this, saying, how dare you try to put our country into more debt than is necessary? And as time goes by, then the Republicans, they release a deal called the HEALS Act. And the HEALS Act was right around $1 trillion. And they said, oh my gosh, you guys are so cheap. You hate the American people. And all of a sudden there was this war over this $1,200 and who could get the stimulus checks out. So right now, we're coming off of President Trump's 4 executive orders, where back in July, the end of July, early part of August, we were promised from both parties that there would be unemployment, stimulus check, help with being behind on rent, help for landlords, and it didn't happen. And so the president steps up, signs these 4 executive orders. Of course, he gets crucified in the media for taking action, right? But now the money is running out. And so you have over 20 million people on unemployment right now saying, where's my next check coming from? How do I pay the rent? How do I buy groceries? So I think what's going to happen is both parties are going to end up in gridlock until a new president is declared, which is sad.
Yeah.
It's so sad.
So you think nothing's going to happen until after the election on this?
Sadly, I don't think anything's going to happen because right now, just a few days ago, President Trump tweeted that all stimulus negotiations were off the table. And he said, are you listening, Nancy? Speaking of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. because a lot of people feel like she is the person blocking money getting to the American people. So I think he wanted to catch people's attention, and it did. The media went crazy. It was Google Trends. I mean, it was going nuts, right? And within a couple of hours, he said, I want a standalone bill for just stimulus checks direct to the people.
Right.
Well, Nancy Pelosi doesn't want to do a standalone bill, even though she was looking at one for the post office, even though she was looking at one for the airlines. And so what I'm reading from Washington Post and New York Times, Wall Street Journal, I'm picking up little bits from each media group where basically the Democrats are saying, we know that our voters are mad at us because it appears like we only care about their vote and not about them as a human. But if we give in at this point, we make President Trump look good and he might win the election. So again, they've weaponized this $1,200 stimulus check against the people. And so I don't think that anything will happen because the Republicans don't want to go for $2.2 trillion more debt. They are willing to do $1.6 trillion, but the Democratic Party is saying, no, we want the $2.2 trillion. Otherwise, you are abusing the American people and leaving too much need on the table that we could solve right now. So again, it's the two parties that are clashing, right? One wants to push for more government and more help from the government. The other side wants to say, hey, we want to make people more independent, and we're worried about how much debt we're taking on for future generations. So as I see it right now, I don't think that there will be a stimulus check until after there's a new president. And then after that, I think that we will see a very large stimulus package where there will be direct checks to the people, maybe even a second check at the first part of 2021, and we'll see some unemployment. I think that it will scale down as unemployment rates come down. But yeah, right now, I feel like they're holding the American people hostage until after the election.
It certainly sounds that way, and it's hard to talk about any of these subjects and not be political, right? Because then, and you're doing a great job of just talking about the two sides without trying to advocate. To me, it's maddening that they're trying to, pass a bill that has nothing to do with stimulus. Saying, hey, it's an opportunity to, add things to a bill that aren't a part of this actual situation. I think they should just focus on that and then fight about the rest of it. But let's not fight about this. And I guess there's a lot of people, and this is, a thing that I contemplate. You've got this big YouTube audience, and they are basically hanging on your every word when it comes to the stimulus, and you paint a picture because they're saying they're waiting weeks, and am I going to pay rent? Am I going to eat? That's a fairly dire predicament. So what do you see for these people? I mean, are you somehow helping to give people some peace of mind, or at least giving them some direction on things they can do? And what's maybe the most important topic you're talking about right now to this audience?
Well, sadly, we're in a holding pattern. And because of this empathetic and compassionate approach I've taken, it's been very eye-opening. I get tons and tons of emails, thousands of comments, to the point where other YouTubers are like, how do you get so many comments? And what's going on within your community? And sadly, there's not a lot that I can do, because even if I emptied my entire bank account, it wouldn't help pay for maybe one or two families, and then I would be broke. Right? And so the one thing that I always try to give them is just that good information, and then resources. So for example, I let them know, okay, if you are desperately, out of food, you can call 211. I was shocked at how many people don't realize that 211 is kind of the 911 of, I need help with utilities, I need help with food. And I'm in this weird position where I believe in teaching people how to fish, but if they're going to starve before I can teach them the skill set, then I have to rethink my approach. And so I encourage people to not give up looking for a job, to connect with family often, to use their network more than their net worth, right? To be creative with their money. Okay, does it make sense to go refinance your auto loan and pull $4,000 or $5,000 worth of equity and buy yourself some time? Does it make sense to pull money out of your 401k right now? A lot of people don't realize this, that you can actually stop contributing to your 401k and it sends more money home each paycheck. They think that because they were auto-enrolled into this program that they must contribute to it. And what I've found, and I'm seeing this a lot now, is after 2007 and 8, almost all employers were like, we can't contribute to a 401k. So now the very best part of a 401k is that match or that free money is now gone. And so that's something that I'm educating people on is, hey, you can stop contributing right now and it could potentially send hundreds more dollars home that you need to live on right now. And if you're struggling to pay rent or buy groceries, a couple $100 is a big amount of money, right? So, I'm trying to educate people to be creative. Unfortunately, we live in a system that tells us to look for a king instead of to be a king, right? And so people need to start thinking for themselves more. They need to start these new businesses and really just take greater control of their own financial future. Unfortunately, we've outsourced so many things, including our finances, to somebody else, that we're kind of at a detriment, where our development is not what it should be because of the way our school systems work and because of the way that Wall Street just wants people funneling money to them so that they can skim fees, whether you win or lose.
Your background as a retirement planner, a financial counselor, has COVID impacted the type of recommendations you make to your clients?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Even though I'm very good at what I do and I have money in an emergency fund that I could get through, the thing that started me on my YouTube journey was in March, April, and May, my income actually went negative. And not because of anything I had done, but the deals that I had in the pipeline, where I had educated people and they were wanting to move forward, suddenly they got scared, or people were saying, hey, I just got laid off. And so that dried up. And then at the same time, other people were like, I need to cancel. And so then I started getting chargebacks for those referral fees that I had been given. And so all of a sudden I found myself in this situation where it was like, oh, wait a minute, I actually might need a stimulus check. So, and again, I have money in an emergency fund, but you hate to dip into it for something you didn't cause, but I had the peace of mind that it was there. And so that's what really got me going on, researching and then just putting out videos. I started with less than 1,000 people that were listening to me, and to now have over 730,000, like I said, it's...
prior to COVID, you had less than 1,000?
Less than 1,000 people.
Oh, wow. So this all just happened very quick.
My gosh, yeah. It was crazy.
But then does that give you the empathy? Because you talked about having empathy. It's like looking at your own circumstance and say, wow, your pipeline froze. People are wanting refunds back on deposits, what have you. I guess you could feel their pain more directly.
Well, and I got my hat handed to me in 2008. I found myself out of work. I found myself going, oh, wait a minute, I've got to short sell a house. I've got to be on food stamps, unemployment. So all of that came rushing back, right? And I actually sent 2 letters to President Trump. On my channel, I let everybody know, full transparency, here's what I am sending. And in there I said how stressful this was financially and emotionally for me, even though I'm in an advantaged position, I can't even begin to understand what it would be like to be in a disadvantaged position. And before the coronavirus lockdown, most people don't know this, but over 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Over 50% of Americans can't cover a $500 emergency. So how are they supposed to survive 6, 7, 8 months of lockdown while jobs are disappearing like crazy? And so to get back to your question, one area that I've been focusing on with people is, does it make sense to be as heavily invested in the stock market while you're also buried in debt? And just going back to the 401k. So I talk to a lot of people where I'm like, okay, what did your 401k average? And they're like, oh, 6%. I go, okay, so you're earning 6%, and you've got about 10% of your paycheck coming out each time to go into the 401k that's earning about 6%, but you've got $20,000 of credit card debt at 28% interest. So when we run the math together, does it make sense to go after the 6% while 28% is escaping out the back door? And once people have that aha moment, it's like, okay, wait a minute. I got to get right with my money. I got to start digging in and understanding this, and then that's where I can start recommending different books to people where they can sit down in their favorite chair and not feel like they're being hit with a sales presentation, and they can actually start getting some of that financial education. But the 401k and controlling your own debt, those have been probably the two biggest areas that I have had to refocus and recalibrate my own business around, just because right now nobody knows what the market's going to do, and they can't control the economy, but they can control their own economy.
I appreciate you bringing all these views because a lot of times we're talking about topics that relate to people who have money, who are, to use your term, advantaged. I live kind of in a bubble in Park City, Utah. So. And boy, when I travel right now and I see what's going on, I realize what a bubble it is. So it's really, I think, informative in multiple ways when somebody like yourself can come in and say, okay, here's the audience I'm speaking to, and here's what's going on for them. And it informs us in many ways. I think for people who are in a good position or trying to figure out what to invest in, et cetera, maybe investing in a business and providing some jobs, and maybe that's kind of a good thing for you and a good thing for other people who are in a compromised position. But I kind of marvel at your success, and how this audience built, and understanding why they're there and why they're listening to you. I think is something that should be paid attention to by everyone who cares about money and economics and such a thing. And I appreciate the fact that you're there for them and giving them information that hopefully is leading them to higher ground. So thanks so much for sharing all this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Isn't Stephen just like this great guy? You can tell he cares a lot. He has a way of communicating that people can understand and feel good about those communications. Feels like he really cares because he does. A lot of great information there. Terrific guy. I believe he deserves every inch of success that he's achieved, and I was really happy to share his information with you. Well, that completes episode 4 of Money Revealed 2020. Man, this is a 9-part docuseries, and now we're moving toward that halfway mark. Excited to be with you, excited to share this with you. Remember that during this free viewing period, we have significant discount on our packages. Take a look at the varying packages. There's something there for everybody. I think you'll like what we have to offer, and the bonuses are not just fluff. They are very high-impact bonuses. Take a look at what they are, too. I will look forward to seeing you in episode 5. It's coming right up.
Economically, I believe we're in serious trouble. The economy is going down and down in GDP, and I'm very worried about it. More important than that is the economy is bifurcating. Some businesses on one side of the street are doing very well. Some businesses on the other side of the street are doing terrible. And what it really comes down to is what I've been saying for decades, is it's which side of technology you're on. Because we've got this animal out there called COVID that operates and changes all the rules. It's as if we flew to a planet where there's no more gravity, there's no more sunlight, it's pitch dark. What are you going to do?
That
iconic meeting that took place on Jekyll Island, which was a private club in Georgia where all of these bankers went to get out of the public eye. They created this thing called the central bank or the Federal Reserve System in secret, because if the public had known that the reform legislation was written by the bankers, they would never have gone for it. There's a real name for that kind of an arrangement, and it's called a cartel.
I think every single person should be taking 10% of their take-home income and automatically placing that into some sort of a long-term investment and learning as much about business and advertising as possible. The hack, if you will, to creating income on demand is by having an audience. Even if it's a few hundred people who actively digest whatever you put into the world, we can turn that into enough money to do damage.